Once upon a time, if only it were that simple. Hey guys, CJ here. The Civil War announcement last week is arguably the biggest comic book related news of the year, and yet there's a ton of negativity surrounding it, especially concerning whether or not the MCU is equipped enough to handle such a groundbreaking and world-changing event. If you guys still have some questions about that, go check out Josh's video about how the MCU should handle Civil War below. But throughout all of the comments, what really seems to be the most common thread is that a lot of people, they know of Civil War, but they don't really know Civil War. Now, this will be a bit of a long video, so pause, go to the bathroom, get a bucket of popcorn, but strap in and always feel free to hit the pause button and Google any heroes you do not know if you feel that'll increase your comprehension. Though I must stress, mostly the minor names are not as important as the actions that occur. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Civil War was a comic book series that ran from 2006 to 2007 in 7 issues. Essentially, it was one big mecha crossover arc with the entire Marvel Universe that more or less raised a simple question: liberty or security? And on the face of it, that seems like a simple Q&A. Most red-blooded Americans would choose liberty and have a heartbeat, quicker than you can say Ronald Reagan. And on the surface, it would seem like the comic was geared to support that specific viewpoint. However, nothing's ever that simple, and in this case, many cast a huge gloss over all of the events that constituted this Civil War. Essentially, most comic book fans will tell you that it boiled down to one thing: secret identities. This is not necessarily true, but because of Spider-Man, who was Marvel's most popular character at the time, and trust me, I will explain that, that's what most people hinge on. What a lot of people seem to be forgetting about Civil War is that it was not just about secret identities. Is that really worth going to all-out war for? What it was really about was the regulation of superheroes. Now, what does that mean? Well, look at it this way. The Marvel world is very different from ours. You might say, well, duh, CJ, superpowers. And yeah, it involves that, but it goes deeper than that, and it gets to a political and cultural level. Specifically, in America, in our universe, and much of the Western world, vigilantism is not accepted. It's actually illegal, and it has been since the 1870s. But the very nature of the comic book universe is that vigilantism has to be legal, or at the very least accepted by a majority of the population. While DC, and specifically Batman, tend to be an exception to this rule, as the police are, trying to catch him in several comic book story arcs, it rings especially true in the Marvel Universe, where groups like the Avengers, the Illuminati, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and individual heroes from Spider-Man to Thor, they act independently and free of restriction. But the question wasn't, should superheroes' identities be known? It's, should superheroes be answerable to a higher power? Or to rephrase, should they be completely untethered, free of any regulation or restriction whatsoever? Some of you might think, well, of course they should, but let me dazzle you with a metaphor. Imagine, per se, that in whatever town you live, there suddenly exists a biker gang. And this biker gang takes it upon themselves to stop any and all crime that takes place. And note, they're not the police, and the police even try to apprehend them. Now, this biker gang can sometimes be sloppy. They might blow up a gas station to catch a purse snatcher. There might be multiple injuries when they catch a mugger. There might be casualties when they catch bank robbers or serial killers. Their presence might attract other biker gangs that want to eliminate them and take over. As I said earlier, they're not the police. They answer to no one. You have no rights in regard to this biker gang. They're not bound by any constitution. You just have to trust, or I guess fear, that they're governed by good morals and won't ever do anything to willingly place the people of your town in jeopardy. These are the superheroes of the Marvel Universe, for good or for bad, and that's the backdrop in which Civil War takes place. To get back to themes for a minute, Civil War boils down to the ideas of liberty and security, as mentioned. Is it better to be free, or is it better to be safe? And this is essentially a metaphysical question which I can't and won't waste time picking sides on. Now, if you know almost nothing about Civil War, you still know that it boiled down to Captain America on the side of liberty versus Iron Man on the side of security. Essentially, these diametrically opposed ideas are something we face this very day in our society, and they've been rehashed over and over again, but most recently notably, in a Marvel film that was released in April that was very successful and critically acclaimed. Some people said it was the best movie Marvel ever made. What was that film? I'll get back to that at the end. So now that we have the background out of the way, what actually happened in the Civil War? It all started on a relatively peaceful day in Stamford, Connecticut. And Connecticut homies, brace yourself, you're going to get way more relevant in 3, 2, not so fast. Before we get to Connecticut, and I'm sorry Connecticut homies, there's important shit that went on in Washington that's sort of a prequel. The Superhuman Registration Act had just surfaced in Congress, and the superheroes weren't happy. Tony Stark and Spider-Man went to Washington to shoot it down. During this trip, Tony is nearly assassinated by Titanium Man, although it would later be revealed that Tony had planned the entire thing. They then asked Cap to support the bill. He refused, essentially pulled an elevator scene, elbowed everybody, and escaped. He became a fugitive. Now back to Stamford and Connecticut homies. Rejoice! Your time is at hand. There was once a team called the New Warriors. They had a reality show filmed about them. They were hip, they were cool, they kicked ass, and they fought crime. But one day they heard about some bad guys, led by Nitro, that were holed up in a house in peaceful, sunny suburban Stamford. Thinking it would be a good way to get ratings, they no-knock warranted the shit out of those goons. Nitro, their leader, as I mentioned, caused an explosion and hundreds, maybe thousands died, including 60 kids at a nearby elementary school. Of course. Side note, one of these new warriors was a fellow by the name of Speedball. He was the only hero that survived, although Nitro also survived, but to atone for his sins and his role in the events, he became Penance, essentially some kind of Rihanna-level S&M Da Vinci Code albino hybrid. Pinhead would be proud, with the spikes and all. The Superhuman Registration Act passes in the wake of the tragedy, and all hell breaks loose. As I mentioned before, regulation. Essentially, the SHIELD employment package isn't a bad one. You get a salary, you get 2 weeks paid vacation. It's just like a normal job, but the only downside is you have to turn over all personal info. You don't have to go public, and I will get to why a lot of people think that is, but you do have to reveal your identity to SHIELD. And a timeout quick aside. Essentially, the per-registration is as follows, and prepare to Google if you need to. Iron Man, Hank Pym, Mr. Fantastic, She-Hulk, Miss Marvel, Sentry, Wonder Man, Tigress, Stature, Bishop, Doc Samson, Black Widow, Thor clone, and I will get back to that, Wasp, Venom, Radioactive Man, and a few select others. For the moment, Spider-Man is also on this team, although his faith is wavering. The anti-registration side is Captain America, Invisible Woman, Goliath, Iron Fist, Matt Murdock, Hercules, Black Panther, Storm, Spider-Woman, Human Torch, Luke Cage, Cloak, Dagger, Hulkling, Wiccan, Arcane, Punisher, Falcon, Typeface, Vision, Madrox, Cable, Nick Fury, Jessica Jones, Namor, Patriot, Bucky Barnes, and Kate Bishop. I feel like Busta Rhymes. As I said, feel free to pause here to look some of these heroes up, although for our purposes in this video, the minor names don't really matter. The actions matter more. And especially that this proves that the Marvel Universe was essentially just divided straight down the middle. And a quick note about Clone Thor, as I mentioned, the real Thor during Civil War was MIA and assumed dead. Tony cloned him using a strand of hair and what was both a secret weapon and a shock value move. Most of the world didn't even know about Thor in the first place, but to the superheroes that did know about him and thought he was dead, it was kind of shocking to see him out there for the pro-reg forces. They ended up not being able to control Ragnarok, as he was called, and he had to be put down. These sides would of course have to change to fit the current MCU rosters, and it's also worth noting that the Fantastic Four split up due to Reed's involvement in the pro-registration campaign. The Thing remained neutral and went off to Paris with Jay-Z and Kanye, while Sue and Johnny joined the Resistance. The X-Men, interestingly, also remained neutral, except for Wolverine, who had the job of tracking down Nitro in the aftermath of Stamford. Now back to the good stuff. Spider-Man shocked the world by going public with his identity to support the act, revealing that he was in fact Peter Parker. J. Jonah Jameson fainted, the world went crazy. He got fired. Several attempts are made on Aunt May and Mary Jane, essentially confirming the reason why most heroes have secret identities in the first place. Now, one of the first skirmishes occurred as Tony and the pro-registration forces got ambushed by Cap and the anti-registration forces. Cap, while shaking Tony's hand, disabled his armor and sucker punched him. During the battle, Clone Thor killed Goliath, sending a bolt of lightning through his chest. This was essentially things escalating to shit just got real status, as the only heroes or villains to die up until this point had done so with Stamford, and it was a relatively bloodless rebellion. In the aftermath of the ambush, the government is doing what it does best, building prisons. Foreseeing that many heroes would follow Cap and simply refuse to comply with the act, Tony Stark, Reed Richards, and S.H.I.E.L.D. built Prison 42 in the neutral zone. This prison is built to hold any and all who will not comply. After being shown the neutral zone prison, Spider-Man began to openly doubt the registration movement, leading Tony to attack him. While Spider-Man survived and escaped, he was pursued by the Thunderbolts, who Tony had hired as bounty hunters for the government. He was beaten, bloodied, and barely alive, but saved by the Punisher, who took him to safety in the form of Captain America's Resistance. Spider-Man officially switches sides here. Towards the very end, as this leads up to the final battle, Cap and the anti-registration forces managed to use a shapeshifter, in this case the Hulkling, to infiltrate the prison and free all the locked-up anti-registration forces. The pro-registration heroes responded to the crisis immediately, and in the panic, Cap led a surprise attack on the prison. Chaos ensued. Cloak, look him up if you need to, summoned all of his power and teleported everyone into the skies over New York. There's actually kind of a touching moment where all the flying heroes, regardless of side, helped the non-flyers to the ground. Then they got back to punching each other in the face. The battle hinged on one key matchup, Cap and Iron Man. As it was, so it shall be. The two that started it finished it. Well, Cap got some help actually, as Venom disabled a portion of Iron Man's armor, essentially the heavy weapons, and it became a hand-to-hand battle. Cap overpowered Stark and prepared to deal the final blow, ready to bring his shield down upon Tony's head. There's a great line that I can easily, visualize Robert Downey delivering, where Iron Man, laying there on the ground, says to Cap, "Do it." When suddenly Cap is tackled and restrained, but not by a superhero, by emergency personnel, cops, firemen, paramedics. Cap suddenly realized that the whole war, while he was fighting for himself and the other heroes, they were all not fighting for those they had sworn to protect. He surrendered to end the madness, and the war is over. In the aftermath, there's a lot to sort out. Tony becomes director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Captain America is taken into custody, and he's finally registered. But then, the unthinkable happened. As a result of his identity being revealed, Captain America is assassinated by Crossbones, who was at the time working for the Red Skull. Captain America died, and with his death, he kind of proved in a way everything that was wrong with the act in the first place. So there you have it, Marvel Civil War. I hope that wasn't too rapid fire for you, but to summarize it all, we had to condense it very heavily. There are, of course, a lot of things I left out, particularly the X-Men and their story arc, although I did mention Wolverine, and he was essentially the only one that had anything to do in that story. And much of the Fantastic Four drama I just glossed over because it's not going to be involved in the MCU, and it really was kind of put on the back burner. To get the full story, of course, pick up the book. Amazon had sold out last week, actually, after the official announcement, but it will likely be available at your local comic shop. It's arguably the defining event of the last decade, and it's definitely worth a read if you get the chance. I also want to take a minute to, take a different stance than a lot of folks on the web seem to want to in saying that the MCU is equipped to handle this, especially under the guise of a Cap movie. Considering how politically heavy and NSA bashy the Winter Soldier got, I feel like this would actually be right up the tonal alley for the Russo brothers and for the Captain America the Marvel movies have cultivated, seeing as he's already greatly concerned with the ideas of personal freedom and liberty. Sure, they don't have all the characters in the comic, but trim it down to the remaining MCU crop, and you essentially still have the central plot of Civil War, minus all the fillings that they had to include for the sake of including tentpole characters like the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. Spider-Man is the real missing man here. They really can't necessarily replace him, although Josh came up with a pretty good second option, so go check that out. And second shameless plug. Marvel can do it, guys. Just have some faith. If you'd like to read more but don't feel like picking up the whole edition, Comic Vine is a great resource, and the rest of the internet should be able to fill in the blanks as well. There's also a great video game, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, for the last gen, Xbox 360 and PS3, which covered this topic. It's really worth a play for any Marvel fan. It's top-down, kind of like Gauntlet Legends. Seeing as this was our inaugural episode, this might become an ongoing series, so what suggestions do you have? How could we do it better? What could we do next time? We're always open to comments and criticisms from you folks, so be sure to hit us up in the section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is CJ. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and signing off, I'll see you next time.